talk about, Walter and I kicked off a little bit talking about innovation, but Christine, I want to start with you. You've started a couple companies. You've sold to big tech, Yahoo and Facebook. How do you define innovation? What does it mean to you?
I think innovation is really looking at the way that things have always been done, questioning why it's been done that way. Obviously, in a lot of cases, there's very good reason for it, and you continue forward. But in some cases, there are...
That's important, though. Always kind of questioning things.
The why. Yeah, always questioning the why. And I think that's really important from a cultural perspective, is to build a culture that is very comfortable pushing back on leaders, pushing back specifically on me, and also looking at, well, why are things done this way, and how can we potentially improve it in a way that makes sense for our business? To me, that's innovation, pure and simple.
Not always a shiny new thing.
No, definitely not.
Louis, what do you see as innovation?
So to this point, extremely important to define the problem you want to solve first. In product in general, the product market fit is the thing to do, and few people spend enough time on the market and they go with the new idea and the new thing, the new feature, without really trying to understand the market enough. So for me, finding and prioritizing that problem is really, really important. And then there's two other P's. One is about process, having a platform, having a space, having a team, having the tools to work. And then people. People is the operating system of innovation. And making sure that your operating system is working well is what I now dedicate my life to at Total Brain, which I think is also very important to constantly innovate.
Walter, we were talking earlier about AI and machine learning in the financial sector, but I gotta bring up a conversation you and I were having about technology and kids and just the overload. What is the balance right now? As we all are taking in so many, technology is just changing so rapidly, and there's so many new things being thrown at us. We're trying to assess, okay, what do I incorporate into my business? What makes sense? At the same time, you and I were talking about limiting it at the same time.
Yeah, and we started that conversation in the context of the conversation earlier about how creepy it could be at some point when everything is so contextual because firms know everything about you in a way that is a little bit dangerous. And then, we're reminded of our children, 24/7 connected, willing to give up absolutely every piece of information without regard to it. And I don't think that all technology is created equal. It doesn't bring the same level of value to your life. If it's not doing something for you that creates some value, then why is it that we so willingly adopt technology? So I think there's a huge danger in that, but there's a broad conversation about it in society, I think, and I'm much more on the side of not giving up significant levels of privacy for some level of convenience of which I actually question the value of it in most cases. In some cases, totally get it. In most cases, I question the value.
I want to ask our group here, how many people are pretty comfortable giving up some level of privacy for convenience when it comes to technology? Show of hands. That's a pretty good group. Yeah. I agree. As lame as I am at home, Google turn off my lights, but I like it. So you're listening to my conversations. Go ahead.
I don't want Google to turn off my lights. I'm happy to do it on my own.
No,
but I just wanted to say one last thing, because you made a comment that I think resonates with me in a huge way about doing things. We've always done it this way, and I have a huge sign in my office, which is a quote by Rear Admiral Greg Harper that says the most dangerous words in our language are "we've always done it this way," and I think. And I think the world is moving away from that, but for so long, I've heard that so many times, even within our business and our institution. Well, we've always done it that way, and I think that is a very dangerous way of thinking.
I do think about for somebody who's running a company and they want to make sure they have a culture where they can foster innovation. What's kind of key there, Christine? You said something to me in our prep call. A company can have an innovative model, but not an innovative culture.
Yeah, and I think, I think of a lot of the businesses that get a ton of kudos for being innovative, in particular a lot of the ride-sharing companies, and they have an innovative model, or they had an innovative model. But if the business model is one thing, and that's usually what gets all the attention, what gets covered, what gets talked about. But it's actually the inner workings on a day-to-day basis and how you're operating that really differentiates whether or not you're innovative. If you take a look at somebody like an Amazon, they're selling goods online. They have a million other businesses, but they're selling goods online. Not particularly innovative, but my God, is that an innovative culture. And I think that's really the difference, is the things that get a lot of attention are often the model themselves. But what really matters and whether or not you'll succeed as a company and take advantage of whatever lead you've established is, can you drive it down on the day-to-day interactions? And can you make sure that the culture that you're fostering is one that is constantly questioning and constantly
How do you
pushing?
do that? How do you get your folks to always question? Because sometimes bosses don't like to be questioned.
I personally love to argue. I love a good debate. So, I like, and I tend to, applaud when people question me, when they come up with a better way of doing something, when they tell me no. I know it's not easy. It's not easy to tell the boss no. But I think that that's a muscle that you have to get used to flexing.
I think, Louis, because you talked about if you're going to create a culture of innovation, you got to make it safe for everybody to do so. Let's talk, because that, I think, piggybacks perfect on what Christine was saying. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so innovation can be a goal, and as a culture, I was at Amazon and worked closely with Jeff. Everybody in the company knows that you're here to invent. Invention is the key word, invention is the thing. But then
Anything's fair game?
Anything's fair game. You need to reinvent everything all the time.
Yeah.
But the real question is not as much what the goal is, it's how do you do it? And how does that innovation materializes moment to moment in those pizza room where there's 7 people working. So you're 7 type A's around the table who all think they're smart, all think they have the truth. How do you make sure that there is safety so that one will say his opinion or his idea without feeling judged, without feeling shut down, without feeling that they can be vulnerable, that they may not be a superstar today, but it's okay, and the team will be cool with that. And so having that safety where people are understood and where people are generous with one another is very much part of the process.
So I'm going to ask what I asked Christine. How do you do that? You can say, okay, this is, everybody, give me an idea, I'm open to it.
Yes.
But your body language can say something else.
Yes, absolutely. Nonverbal speaks louder than verbal. Whatever you say is less important than the energy you project. And so how do you get people to behave that way is one, by setting the example. As a leader, you need to be that way. You need to be that guy all the time. That's why it's hard to be a leader. And secondly, you need to put as much process in place to facilitate that thing. And so that means let's have conversations, let's make it part of our values, and let's make sure that we encourage it, that we value it with our dollars, that we celebrate the people who show compassion at work, that sort of thing. Is very, very important. And making sure that your people are psychologically healthy is the other piece. Wellness, making sure that the staff is managing their stress properly, that they are aligned, that they are centered, is as much a part of this as anything else, as self-awareness drives everything.
I have to jump in because I can see the two of you. Go ahead first.
So I was going to say, on a very concrete level, we have a process in place that we call stack ranking, right? And this
You call it what?
Stack ranking.
Oh, okay.
It's a prioritization process, right? Everybody's got one. But we religiously follow this because I'm notorious for coming in on a Monday morning and saying, oh, here are 90 things we should be doing, right? And it would disrupt and throw off, a couple hundred people's weeks. And so
Christine says we got to do this.
Yeah, and I don't want a culture where Christine says we have to do this and we just do it. But again, it's hard to tell the boss no. And so what we did was we put in place very concretely something where I come in, I say my ideas, somebody says, oh, those are great. Let me put them on the list. And we've got a scoring methodology. that ties to the goals and objectives of the company and what we're trying to drive in the next 12 to 18 months. And so my ideas get scored against, and so does everybody else's, right, against whatever that person's working on. And either it rises to the top 3 or it doesn't. And you'd be surprised how often my things do not rise to the top 3. And that actually means nobody should be wasting time on it right now. Maybe it bubbles up later on, maybe it rises to the top later on, but it's a way to say no where there is consistency across the company. There's a common lexicon, a common vocabulary that gives people tools and empowers them to really own their days and their weeks. And if you want other people to innovate, you need to give them the space to do that. And you can't do that when you're constantly blowing up everything that they work on. So we had to actually put in place very concrete tools and procedures to make sure that the louder people, like myself, weren't constantly driving the conversation, and the best ideas weren't always winning.
Right, and I will say, come on in.
Yeah, just a couple of quick reactions to both Christina and
Can I
Louis,
just say that when Louis said something about centering,
about what?
about centering, you had a funny reaction.
No, well, there are a couple of things that Louis mentioned are difficult to get there. For example, the psychological well-being of your group, and those are things that are incredibly important, yet very difficult to get at, and you actually can get yourself in trouble in attempting to intervene in there. So I reacted a little bit to those things, but I was going to say that the two concepts that came out the most, one is the safety concept, which is absolutely crucial for innovation, and the other one that Christine just mentioned is like creating the space. If you have people running 24/7 with 15,000 things doing, it's difficult to innovate when your brain is bombarded and your body is exhausted, and so creating the space. But the last thing I wanted to mention is you kept asking, well, how do you get it done? One last thing I would say is that I also think is how you react when those situations happen makes all the difference in the world. So even if somebody brought up an idea that gets at the bottom of the stack and nobody thought in the room was a good idea, if the reaction is that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of, people are never going to raise their hand again. So how you react in the moment and validating people for thinking creatively and bringing ideas to the table, even if they don't work out, I think over time, doing a lot of that gives people that sense of safety that they can raise their hand and talk about something, even if it's more controversial or a little bit out there.
It's walking the talk, right?
Yes, walking the talk, yes.
I do wonder, though, because we were talking backstage, and I'm someone who's done yoga for a long time, and I do find that moment where I can be still or wake up early and have 5-10 minutes of meditation or just to think. It's amazing the amount of ideas. I am well rested. Liz is right. But the amount of ideas, like all of a sudden the synapses start firing and things come together. And I think it's a healthy idea. But how do you foster that in your company? You got to think about being profitable, getting things done, top and bottom lines. I'm curious what you guys think about that.
So if I may, as a practitioner of this, I take my entire company to a retreat 3 times a year. We go in the redwood forests, and we have a 3-part program. The first part is we rejuvenate. So we're going to breathe, we're going to relax, we're going to do nothing, we're going to go for walks, we're going to connect with nature.
Does everybody do this?
Everybody does that.
Okay.
Can you invite me to the next one?
I can.
Can you invite all of us?
Yes. The second piece is we have intentionality around team building. Let's get to know each other in detail. So what's your life? Heart-to-heart communication, and then business alignment and so on. Making that part of the business rhythm is extremely easy because people need it. They want the break. They want to have nothing for a minute. And when they come out of those moments, to your point, they are recharged, they're filled with intuitive thoughts as opposed to just the mind being totally overtaken by the rationality. The creativity is up, connection is up. And so it's not something that you can force onto people.
Right.
But when you offer it up, my experience is people want to take it, and when they take it, you change a lot of things internally.
Do either of you have thoughts on that?
I think he's 100%.
I mean, Wells Fargo is a huge company. Can you take everybody on a retreat?
Well, 265,000 team members, that makes it difficult, of course. But again, I really agree with what Louis is saying, although I think it is very difficult to do in a company of our scale. And also earlier, as Christine was talking about the group where they talk about all the ideas and stack them, I think there are unique areas of Wells Fargo within that work precisely in that manner. For example, the innovation group that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And then there's more mundane sort of businesses that have a much tougher time sort of behaving that way or having the experiences that Louis can provide to his team. So I struggle with how to create a balance where you can do those things, yet prosecute the unbelievable amount of business that needs to be done on a daily basis. But I recognize fully that if you're not allowing people then to slow down and take that time to become creative or innovative, and they're just all day long, working, it becomes difficult for a culture of innovation to truly exist throughout the enterprise versus that being someone's job. I don't just want it to be somebody's job in the innovation group. I want it to be embedded in the DNA of every employee. Now, that's very difficult to get there in a company like ours.
But there's more and more help on the technology front. There's a lot of
Right,
technologies
that's
out
true.
there trying to help us to do
Apps.
this. Apps of all kinds, where it doesn't require to completely change all business processes. It's optional, and we have adoption rates with people meditating of up to 50% of businesses we're in. And it's all optional and voluntary, and it's 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And so, yes, the goal is big when you have to move an army, but if you start with simple technology you make available, you can be surprised by how fast adoption can pick.
Well, it's interesting. I remember doing a story on Pixar and going out on the West Coast, and they had a company where you could go and play on a basketball court. They had barbecue. Like, you could just do anything, and they set up the company so that if you were creative at 2 a.m, that's when you can work. I mean, that's what they did. And I do wonder, Christina, how you think about this and how you approach it.
I mean, we're a lot more old school than it sounds like Wells Fargo is on things like this. We have to remind ourselves to, hey, sponsor a corporate happy hour once a quarter or once every 6 months. We have to remind ourselves that human connection matters.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's something that our employees are asking us for, maybe a reason to get together other than work. But I think so many of us are so focused on all of the work that has to get done, and wake up in the morning thinking about this stuff and go to bed thinking about this stuff, that it just feels like it's more natural. Whereas I think as you start, we're a little over 500 people now, but as you start getting more and more people outside of that smaller core group, you need to be intentional about the programs that you're putting in place and about the opportunities that you're offering. We look at it as, look, you get unlimited vacation. Take time off when you need it. That should be enough for you to recharge. We're not really doing necessarily the things that are more part of the ongoing business.
Yeah.
And we're listening to our employees who are starting to push us more in that direction, but it does feel like, on this front, we have a little bit of growth to do on more of that whole balance. We're not very balanced today.
I wanted to ask you guys who you see as the innovators out there, and it could be people, companies. Who is it that you keep an eye on? Who wants to start?
I mean, I already said it. I mean, Amazon,
It's
right?
Amazon. Is it really Amazon?
I mean, we're in the apparel space. We
Yeah.
offer B2B technology to allow traditional brick and mortar companies to enter into the rental subscription economy. So for us, that is the company to watch out for. It's also a company we hugely admire. And they're, they kill it on innovation. They kill it on, just being in so many different industries.
Is it friend or foe for you?
I think it's probably more foe than friend. I think a lot of the companies that we support that we take sort of an anti-Amazon approach. That doesn't take away from the fact that I hugely admire the company, and I think they're massively they're category leaders. But we do pay a lot of attention to them.
Innovation can take many flavors. Product innovation, market innovation, business model, all of this. Amazon is my favorite by far. But there is other types of innovation, and I think the time for HR innovation has come. We have more data on people than we've ever had HR should be able to leverage that data to provide tools that allow leaders to meaningfully, respectfully, and with relevance make people better. And so there's many great companies that are doing amazing things in that field. One that I particularly appreciate is Ellen Fisher out in San Francisco, the apparel company.
Right.
They are starting every meeting with a 1-minute silence, and then people express how they're coming to the meeting so that they leave the baggage outside of the conversation they're going to have. That is innovation as well.
Yeah.
And I applaud it, and I want to do it for my own, and I wish that we all will invest in HR innovations coming forward.
Yeah, when we talk about disruption, that's probably one of the areas that it hasn't quite happened. Something we'll talk about a lot more this afternoon. Walter, who do you watch? Yeah.
So I think those are two, great examples of companies that are incredible at innovation, and you were talking about how inventing things is the mantra at Amazon, and I think I look at it differently for who we are and in financial services. We are not trying to disrupt anything, not innovate to have innovation for innovation's sake. We're looking at, how do we provide that frictionless, seamless, and contextual, service across services, products, and advice to all of our clients. So what is it that our customer client needs are? How can we innovate to deliver that much better? So it's different because we're not necessarily then trying to change the world, but we're trying to change is the way that we engage with our clients to provide a much better service. And in that particular context, we are a highly, highly innovative company. So again, in a different way than the Amazons of the world.
I wanted to open it up to everyone because we wanted to have a little bit of a group think and discussion about this panel and just some of what you've heard this morning in terms of leadership and innovation. So I'd love somebody to maybe kick off our conversation here. Maybe has a question. Anybody? Ah. And say who you are, what you do. Oh.
Hi, Dr. Philip Yu from the 21st Century Regenerative Medicine Institute in California. Yeah, so innovation, obviously, it's needed because, there's a saying that if you don't disrupt your business, someone else will disrupt you. And, I think it's smart to have an innovative team, but just like what he was saying, your best thoughts happen when you're not at work. And so what I do is my best, business thoughts are when I'm away. I flew the red-eye flight from California. I flew to LAX 11:15 last night to get that one idea I would never have gotten if I was in California the whole time. So I just applaud that you're all innovating, but understanding that it's an ongoing process, and you have to disrupt your business all the time, or another business will disrupt you, like the behemoths like Amazon, blah, blah, blah.
Well, so what do you think about that? Yeah.
First of all, we're among friends. If you can share that idea that you got on the red eye, we'll take it. But we were talking about this earlier. I 100% agree with you. You can't just wait to see what somebody else has done and attempt to react. I say all the time that if anyone is going to disrupt my business or broadly financial services, I want to be the one disrupting it. Disrupt yourself. It's of course hard to get there, but that is materially better than sitting back and waiting to see what somebody else does and attempting to react.
So one thing we do at our company, we always have a moonshot idea, something that's, the goal is really, really high, out of the world, and if you don't reach it, like jumping for that branch on top, you're going to get the branch lower, so you're always going for that extra mile. So yeah.
Very good.
One thing that I've learned at Amazon, of all places, is to not focus so much on competition. What you focus on is the problem to be solved. And as long as you are narrowly focused on that and the value that you provide to your customer, and you hold you responsible for improving upon that, not once in a blue moon, every day, you're not going to be disrupted. because you're going to own the relationship, you're going to have the loyalty, you're going to have this long-term rapport with your market. And it's a commitment to the value you provide to your customers that I think is the better driver of disruption. And it's a continuous process. It's not a breakthrough thing. You do it continually, and then you end up in Amazon's position.
Or constantly asking why we do something, right, along the way. Do we have another question?
See you. Hi, thank you. Thank you for this great conversation, by the way. I'm Charlie Oliver. I'm the CEO and founder of Tech 2025. What we do is we have conversations about everything that we're talking about here, but we have them with, I say the general public. I hate to say that, but we're all general public. But basically, these are your employees, right? These are employees at big companies, and these are employees on innovation teams at big tech companies or even mid-sized companies or even startups, right? So when they come to us, we have a problem-solving model where we say to them, first and foremost, don't believe anything that anyone has told you about what you know or don't know, okay? That includes your employer, that includes tech companies, that includes the government, anyone. So when they come to us, we ask them to, have a blank slate. And then the other thing is we actually mix them up with different people. So it's not a room full of tech people. It's not a room full of people who are all, product managers. We have 75-year-olds come in and sit next to 25-year-olds, and it's a lot of fun. And they come up with great ideas. And to that end, I can tell you we've had big companies participate. When I say that, I mean we've had, like General Motors and Cruise Automation come in and do presentations. And the whole idea behind that is when they come in, they have to submit themselves to the process. And that means let go of telling the audience what they should or shouldn't think and being open to the criticism. So anyway, I said all of that to say, we've learned and what we've been told by executives and people on innovation teams and everything, and even researchers and developers of the technologies, is that they are shocked by the creative ideas coming from people in these types of situations where they have no boundaries. They don't feel comfortable saying a lot of the things that they're saying in our, events at work during the day, right? So my question to you is, because there's so much value there, and even at that GM one that we did, the executives were just shocked and said, boy, how can we get this information back into the company? How can you guys, or how are you tapping into the conversations that employees are having as just normal people every day outside of the company that they don't feel safe enough to have inside of your company?
I think for us, our second corporate value is connect the dots differently. And it's really around bringing creative and traditional retail resources and blending them directly with data science and with engineers. And how can you bring very different perspectives, very different types of people, very different ways of approaching life together in order to solve problems. And so I think a lot of the magic does happen on the boundaries, when you can get people talking directly with each other who come from very different perspectives and in a way that encourages active listening and participation. I think for us, the way that we go about doing what you're talking about is actually instill it into the corporate values. That has to be a way that you approach situations, encourage people to think. For us, it's put it at the top line. This is core to what we do. It's connect dots differently. And so that means somebody who's been doing visual merchandising, literally launching product on a site, is able to have a deep conversation with a data scientist who's figuring out the algorithms that are going to drive a more automated approach to things. And they have to speak each other's languages. And if they can't figure out that bridge, we're going to lose out on any kind of innovation that could come from that conversation.
I'm curious to everybody who's here, are you worried? How many of you are worried that you don't have a good culture that fosters innovation? No. Okay, so you guys feel pretty confident about that. Okay.
I hope none of you are in financial services. I don't want to be disrupted.
Disrupt or be disrupted. I'm just saying. Let's go over here. There's a couple over here. Go kind of move around the room. And try and be a little bit briefer because I want to get to as many.
Hi, my name is Gunnar Larson. With regards to Wells Fargo, with the problems that Wells Fargo has had over the last few years, how do you rethink innovation from that standpoint?
That's a good question. The problems that Wells Fargo got into over the last couple of years are unrelated to sort of innovation and related to other issues, of course. So we were an innovative company then. We continue to be an innovative company now. But this notion, some of the conversations we were talking about, the safety in being able to not just bring an innovative idea, but bring a problem to the table and be able to raise your hand and talk about when you find a problem. So that safety needs to be created way beyond just the notion of innovation. And I think that we've created a culture, we've transformed a culture in a way that is materially more inclusive and safe. And I think that is a significant change in the way that we operate today that would lead us to not have some of the troubles that we've had in the past. Thank you.
Good question. Over there.
All right, hi, Chike Okewu, founder of Startup 52. So we talk about innovation, we talk about leadership, and research has shown that diversity and inclusion, of course, drives innovation for positive outcomes. It also humanizes us. It helps to sort of block off some of our blind spots, collectively. As leaders, how intentional are you in ensuring that your workforce is diverse, is inclusive, but more importantly, that you think about diversity and inclusion in building the culture that creates a safe space for retention and for all that stuff for people who don't look like you, who don't worship like you, who don't, everything like you?
I can start. Diversity and inclusion is one of the 6 most important tenets of our corporate vision and values. And I think that creating, and by the way, personally, when I talk about diversity and inclusion, I really, really go to the inclusive side because it is impossible to foster diversity without people feeling safe and really fostering a highly inclusive environment. One of the things that I say all the time is that I want people to bring who they are to work, and it goes back a little bit to the conversations that we were having earlier. And if you don't feel safe and you're not who you are at work, you're not going to feel good. We're not going to be able to retain you, and selfishly, you're not going to perform at the highest level. So I think it is absolutely an imperative. It is both a human and a business imperative to really foster a highly diverse and inclusive environment. Having said that, there are challenges, in particular in financial services and in some of the more, in some specific areas within financial services, even more difficult to find that diversity. So we're very, very intentional about it. And I would say that we also have a lot of work to do to get to a space where we are where we need to be.
Louis or Christine, anything you want to add?
I mean, it's an important conversation. It's one for us that we're actually pretty intentional about in making sure that we have diversity at, various levels within the company. And that diversity comes in many different shapes and sizes. And I think overall we're doing relatively well on some of the obvious ones. It helps that the company is led by a woman. That helps kind of kick off the diversity and inclusion.
It makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, at least on one dimension.
Yeah.
We're okay on racial diversity. We're actually struggling on African Americans. We're really solid on Asian and South Asians. We're having a really hard time, and I think it's becoming a problem for us because you get to a certain size, and if you don't have enough penetration, it becomes not an inviting environment. We became, a year ago, we had an issue. Actually, we didn't have enough men in the company, in particular in our New York office. It was about 90% women. So out of 100 people, we had 6 guys walking around. And, while on one hand, some people were
like dating in New York.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, it's great to have, yeah.
I'm not dating, but I'm just saying. So I've heard.
You've heard, yes.
It's, on one hand, it's like, well, it's been the reverse for so long, so let's just ride this out.
Yeah.
It's actually a problem. And we made an intentional effort to diversify and bring in men. And it's
been a good thing.
It has been. There's been a couple of teams that have clustered probably a little bit higher on the density and the gender ratio, and now that's becoming a different kind of problem. So this diversity and inclusion is a living, breathing beast that you're constantly looking at and saying, okay, what signal is this sending? How are people interacting? Is this creating a welcoming environment so that we can bring in the best talent? And I think there are some areas where we are still struggling, and we have to do more. It's not easy, but if it were easy, this wouldn't be a topic of conversation. And I think you have to be, as a leader, intentional about it. And I think you have to invest in it. And so sometimes you've got to look longer and you've got to look harder in order to find the right kind of person that brings in a different mindset. All of that said, those are the easy ones, right? Because those are ones you can see. Belief-based diversity and inclusion, I think, is actually one of the toughest, whether that's religion, which I think, is a little bit easier, but like political diversity, social issue diversity. That's really hard. And I think it's also hard because it can cut to some core value systems as well. And so,
but important to have.
Important to have the discussion.
Yeah.
Then you get to decide whether it's important to have within your company and what kind of company you want to be. I'm not actually sure on certain.
Yeah.
I don't think just because you have an opinion, it's necessarily valid at the company.
Walter, I want to bring you in, but hey, is it important to be politically diverse?
I think
little weak.
No, but yes, because what I wanted to say, ultimately, what is it that we're looking for in any level of diversity is diversity of thought. So if you measure racial diversity or ethnic diversity and gender diversity and the more measurable things that you're talking about, you could actually end up still with a fairly homogeneous group of people with the same background, the same again, religious beliefs, political affiliations, on and on and on. And at the end of the day, if you're sitting around, a table, you don't have diversity of thought.
Correct.
So, and to me, ultimately, that's the real goal, that you don't have one view at the table, but multiple views can be expressed.
For me, it has to be done within the confines of building a culture.
Yep.
And a culture is about beliefs.
Yeah.
And so if you have a cafeteria of belief, what's happening with the culture, right? So you need to allow it as long as we align on some core beliefs.
Right.
And so for me, that is the driver of all the new staff that gets hired in my company. Talk to me for half an hour, and I will make that time for as long as I can to just check for that. Make sure that we see eye to eye from a value standpoint, and after that, that's as much as we can do today, but it's already a lot.
No, I think it's really powerful because I think, one thing I've loved about a newsroom, and yes, a lot of journalists tend to be liberal, but that there is, believe it or not, diversity of thought. And we have these conversations where people come at it from different perspectives. And I think there needs to be a level of respect that we've lost in society at large, that I don't have to agree with you, but I do want to hear what you have to say or what you have to say, because hopefully I learn something and we all gain out of it. Another question, wherever you want to go. Go to Mike. Mike. He's standing.
He doesn't need a mic.
Yeah, I don't think he needs a mic.
No.
I'm Stuart Sugarman from Atolla Capital. I've been taking notes and listening to you, and I'm trying to figure out to myself what's missing.
Uh-oh.
What's missing in all this conversation of gender equality and are we hiring enough of this versus that is the humanity of it all. And I want you to think about this thought. When you first started working in banking, do you remember when you were mandated to take 2 weeks vacation? And why did you have to take that 2 weeks vacation? Because they wanted to make sure that you weren't stealing from the bank. It's true.
That is 100% true.
If you worked on Wall Street, you had to take 2 weeks off, okay? So what we're trying to get to with all of this is purpose, passion, value, and responsibility. And what we find is one of the limiters of innovation is responsibility, because people are human beings and they have jobs and they want to do a great job, and they do such a great job they can't get home to their family, they can't be social, they can't do things. So what do we really do? We try to support them in sports, we try to support their particular interest. But one of the things that we do when we invest in a company is that we mandate a week's vacation. Do nothing. Go be with your family, come from thought. I can tell you countless experiences of being on. The best thing for me is I used to take a bunch of papers, fly halfway around the world. I was full of ideas. full of ideas because I was getting out of my own way. And it's about best and highest use of the individual and how do we encourage that. So that's what I invite you to think about. It's not a black-white issue. It's not a gender issue. It's a human issue.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that? It's really provocative. Come, over there. Right behind you, Kylie. Thank you for that.
And I love the passion, so thank you for that.
My reaction to that is it seems like we're talking about looking at our customers and understanding their data, and now we're wanting to know our employees and their data. Yeah. So we've gone from A/B testing with Facebook to now doing A/B testing with employees and looking at crowdsourcing innovative ideas from them. But when you scale to a size as big as Wells Fargo, then maybe HR and AI go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I don't know, just
it's a good thought.
I personally
that goes
think,
to what you've been talking
I
about.
personally think it does within the, you don't want to repeat Facebook's mistake, right? You want to make confidentiality and privacy the primary driver of those things if you're going to leverage data in HR, because you're going to make that mistake once and then you're done. So anyone that has half a brain doing those things will say privacy, confidentiality first, but then let's leverage the power of aggregation. We're able to tell a company today, your stress has gone up 50% in aggregate in your Austin office, and it's driving the capacity to think down by 35%. How fabulous is this? That's management information that you can go back and do something about.
But I think you also, I mean, part of the reason why you have to take the HR plus the AI and you're turning your attention inward is because the number one asset you have are your people. And it's a talent war out there. And so you have to understand how to get the most out of them, but you also have to understand how to retain the best ones. It's as important, if not more so, than retaining your best clients. And so I think that's part of the focus on it is just realizing that the number one asset you have as a company and the only real differentiator you're going to have over time are the people who show up next to you every day.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
hi there. My name's Edward Sullivan. I'm the CEO of Velocity Group. We are an executive coaching firm here in New York and San Francisco, and we work with dozens of startups and corporates. And I can't tell you how encouraged I am that the conversation about innovation today is about culture. And at the end of the day, culture really begins with the behavior of the executives, the behavior of the CEO. And the question I have for us as a collection of CEOs is, how are we modeling behavior that inspires creativity and innovation? How are we modeling behavior that encourages work-life balance? Are we actually taking vacation? Are we taking time away? I remember being really inspired by the story of Mark Benioff. During some of the fastest growth at Salesforce, he would take a week every 2 months and go to his place in Hawaii and just reflect. And now, I don't know if we can all take a week every 2 months, but
It is Mark Benioff.
I guess the question I have for us is, are we modeling the behavior we want to see in our employees? Because I can't tell you how many companies we work with, they have the unlimited vacation policy. The CEO never takes vacation, so no one takes vacation. Yeah. So just a little thought over lunch. Thanks.
Can we do one more question? 2 more questions? Okay. I'm going to go. What? I know we got to feed these people. Up here?
Model the behavior.
No, we don't. General McChrystal eats once a day and he eats dinner, so deal with it. Right? Deal with it.
Hi, I'm Michael Solomon. I'm the founder of 10X Management. We're a talent agency for very high-level freelance tech talent. I also help other technologists negotiate their job offers, so the HR world is very much where I live. And I'm really curious because you use the term HR innovation, and I'm very curious to hear what that means to you because I'm just starting just agreed to do a book on this, and I'm not seeing a lot of real HR innovation at all. I find that that's the department that lags farthest behind in every company. Yeah. So what is HR innovation to you guys?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to talk to you about Total Brain and how by measuring the brain of the employees, not their personalities, not their character, but their brain capacities, we're able to track not only we're able to track the indicator of their performance over time, because you're going to perform in as much as your brain is functioning. And so access to that kind of data is game-changing for HR. There is a lot of companies that are doing a lot around incentivization of wellness behavior. And in the healthcare space, a plethora of technologies trying to understand how to increase the health outcomes out of population by incentivizing the right behaviors, by having gratitude journals, by having all sorts of things that you would usually think, well, that's in the realm of personal growth.
Right.
That's nothing to do with business. But those things are now coming together because, to your point, sir, this is about humanity. This is about we're human beings.
Right.
And you stop having a silo of I have my health here, my disease there, and my work there, and my family there. It's all one thing. And we now have the tool to track and affect that one thing wherever, whenever. And that's what I'm referring to, and I'm happy to give you a bunch of other examples.
I think that's a big deal, because one of the things I keep hearing in conversations about industries, doesn't matter, holistic, how they approach things, financial, holistic, from when you're younger, what are you thinking about? Like, you think about someone's whole life. But anyway.
The only thing I would say is that there is part of the reason, in my opinion, why HR innovation hasn't really taken hold and hasn't gone fully in the direction that Louis describes, and he clearly knows more about HR innovation that he's forgotten more than I'll ever know. The truth is that there's also a risk and a level of fear at large organizations that the legal framework and the regulatory framework hasn't caught up with the things that we're describing. And if you're a very large corporation, in every interaction, you're seeing a lawsuit at the end of it. So as you attempt to innovate in the HR world, that becomes a very difficult thing to do, in particularly the larger you are.
So we need to be very specific in terms of what legal risks we're talking about. Our clients are all Fortune 100 companies. We're Boeing Vendor of the Year 2 years ago. And so there are things that are fully there's no questions, no risks. There are things that certainly have risks, but we need to be very specific, not to paint the whole HR innovation thing with one brush, because it's really depends.
Well, and I also do think there's a perception HR is for the company, and I think what we're talking a little bit more is about thinking about the employee sometimes more. Christine, last thoughts?
I mean, just to that, I wouldn't say, I would agree with you. I don't see a ton of innovation. Not that doesn't mean that it's not out there. It just means that as a company, we're not at the place where we can really embrace innovation in the HR space. We're still making sure, and I think these are kind of table stakes. Do we have a job architecture? Can we give people career pathing? Do we have a really solid performance review process that pulls in core competencies and the value system? I think before you can get to HR innovation, you better be doing the basics, right, by your people. And I think there are so many companies that are struggling in that, because it is an area that you invest in probably a little bit too late. So for us, it's about getting the basics right first, and then hope to be in a place where we can innovate, where we can make use of some great technologies. But I think first we're simply at, let's just get table stakes and let's make sure we're doing the basics right for people so that they have a career pathing and they have clear expectations.
I have to say thank you, because you guys have teed up the afternoon, because we're going to talk about talent. You talked about humans working with technology. You've talked about a talent war that's out there. I think everybody talks about talent acquisition, and you talked about HR being the next frontier. So we are so well set up for this afternoon. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Enjoy lunch. Don't forget to come back here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.